I always try to think of, million-dollar ideas for videos, like what videos would everyone really be entertained by? What videos would everyone enjoy? What kind of videos would I like to make? And I always stumble upon a video that I go, yeah, this video has the potential to really unite everybody across all fandoms. And today, that is why I am talking about both the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy. Let's have some fun, guys. Welcome back to Access Blockbusters, everybody, and welcome back to the wrap-up of the Star Wars Re-Examined series, where I went through all 11 live-action Star Wars films from Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, all the way until Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And I really wanted to strip away all of the noise and all of the background and all of the context and just really watch these films for what I thought they were and enjoy them. And I think I did a really great job of just being able to enjoy Star Wars again. And that's really all I wanted to do, is enjoy Star Wars again and share my thoughts with you guys. But in today's video, let's bring in the context again, and let's talk a little bit about what I think now, having rewatched all these films of the prequel trilogy versus the sequel trilogy. What works, what doesn't, and ultimately, which trilogy would I rather rewatch? That's really going to be the motivating question of this video, is which trilogy, if I had to watch all three films back to back to back, let's just say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I had to watch Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker, or Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith, which one would I rather do? And hey, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel before we get any further, please make sure to do so, give this video a like, and let me know in the comments down below, which trilogy would you rather rewatch and why? I know it's actually kind of a harder decision to me than I originally thought. That's why I'm making this video in the first place, just a fun little video talking about which of the trilogies really seems the more appealing to me. And we'll go through my reasonings as we get into this video. But if you haven't subscribed again, make sure to do so. And without further ado, let's get into it. So let me start out by saying this. I think that the prequel trilogy, in terms of actual quality filmmaking, is infinitely worse than the sequel trilogy. And that has to do with a lot of reasons, many of which were in George Lucas's control, obviously, but a few of them that were kind of out of the control of George Lucas. And again, this is a very personalized, subjective video essay, so it's going to really apply mostly to me. And I'm just going to start off with one of the things that I don't think George Lucas could have done anything about, really, because I think he did an amazing job with this, and that's the visual effects. And that's really the age of filmmaking that he made the prequel trilogy in. Because the prequel trilogy, for better or for worse, was made 20-some years ago. The technology has improved, the CGI has improved in most instances. And I'm not going to deny that even though the CGI in the prequel trilogy was revolutionary for the time, the sequel trilogy just looks better, and it is by proxy. The only reason that it does is because it is made in 2015, 2017, and 2019. There's nothing that George Lucas could have done anything about. It's simply the fact that the sequel trilogy was made after the prequel trilogy, and technology is advanced, and therefore, when I'm watching the sequel trilogy, yeah, it is prettier to look at. It is more modern looking, and the CGI is less apparent, it's less obvious as it was in certain shots of the prequel trilogy, for sure. But let's talk about some things that George Lucas could control. The dialogue. Yeah, the dialogue, especially in terms of inter-character relationships, especially Anakin and Padme, but also even sometimes Anakin and Obi-Wan, is atrocious. The dialogue is really one of the weakest parts of the prequel trilogy, and it really makes some of the scenes really hard to watch. The action sequences, I can get behind. Most of the banter and the fun dialogue, I can get behind, like Anakin and Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith. But really, the serious dialogue, he just goes for this level of melodrama that it's funny, but not intentionally, so it just doesn't quite work. I also think, unfortunately, that Hayden Christensen was miscast as Darth Vader. I think that while he is a good actor and has the potential to be a really great actor, and he continues to do good work, especially recently in the Star Wars universe again, I just think that for the time that he was cast, he really wasn't the best choice to play Anakin Skywalker. And to be honest, I don't think Natalie Portman was the best choice to play Padme Amidala either. I think that just given the situation and taking every factor into account, looking at the dialogue, looking at the script, and looking at the films that we're making, I think that the roles were miscast. I think that roles like Ian McDiarmid, obviously returning from the original trilogy, and Ewan McGregor, I think they were great, but I even think that Samuel L. Jackson didn't really quite have a place in there as well. He was just forced to be this really bland Jedi when what we really love about Samuel L. Jackson is his personality. And yet Samuel L. Jackson's Mace Windu was one of the blandest characters in all of Star Wars. So on a technical level, in terms of just pure filmmaking, absolutely The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker have a huge upper hand over the prequel trilogy films, no doubt. And yet, it's not as clear-cut as I want it to be, and here's why. Because while the sequel trilogy, I believe, is technically very well made, it is also a disaster in its own right, at least to me. And this is an argument that you've heard over and over again, I'm sure, so I'm not breaking new ground here, but this is just me talking about my own thoughts, and so I'm going to say it again. The sequel trilogy had no plan. And not only did it have no plan, it had no willingness under Kathleen Kennedy to course correct and make a plan as the sequel trilogy went along. After The Force Awakens and after The Last Jedi, there really was no attempt by Kathleen Kennedy to go, okay, we need to find a filmmaker who is going to be able to tie these two films together for better or for worse. Instead, she rehired J.J. Abrams, who made basically an Episode 9 that took into account an Episode 8 that he made that didn't exist. And I mean, again, if that were the case, if there was an Episode 8 that J.J. Abrams had made that was consistent somehow with what he set up in Episode 7 and what he made in Episode 9, fine, then do that. But there needed to be an overseer at least, because while George Lucas didn't direct every single film of the original trilogy, he only directed the first one, he oversaw the entire story of all three films. It wasn't like Richard Marquand and Irvin Kershner just had free will to do whatever they want. No, George Lucas was overseeing the entire project, and there needed to be somebody like that there. Whether it was Dave Filoni, or whether it was Jon Favreau, or J.J. Abrams, or Rian Johnson, there needed to be somebody to guide the entire story, even if you have different directors directing those films. And as a result, the sequel trilogy story and character development makes no sense. I mean, the character of Rey Palpatine, as we know her now to be after Episode 9, I don't understand anything about her. Like, I'm sure that series like The Mandalorian and canon comics and books are going to do their best to explain everything that happened in the sequel trilogy, like Snoke and Rey and all that kind of stuff. But again, when I watch these films on their own, I see the setup there in Episode 7. I see everything that's kind of vaguely left up for interpretation, like, oh, Rey is a very powerful Force user. Who are her parents? We don't know. Episode 8 goes, we don't really care about her parents, not in a bad way, just saying that her parentage doesn't really matter to the story. JK, in Episode 9, they really do. So ultimately, the decision comes down to 3 better-made films, technically speaking, that have good action, that have good dialogue, for the most part, and that have good actors playing good characters, sometimes, in a story that absolutely makes no sense, versus a series of films that has a story that makes some sense, actually, that's actually really interesting, that was executed so poorly, for the most part. Again, there are some things in the prequel trilogy that I really like, but for the most part, was executed so poorly that sometimes it's unwatchable. What do? You're stuck between a rock and a hard place. So again, I return to the question of if you were forced to watch the 3 prequel trilogy films or the 3 sequel trilogy films, which one would I watch? And the answer might surprise a lot of you, because for as much as I hate the sequel trilogy story overall, and for as much as I think the sequel trilogy is a disaster, I still will have to go sequel trilogy over the prequel trilogy, because as much as I appreciate at least the culmination of the prequel trilogy in Revenge of the Sith, which I think is a very fine movie, for the most part, at least with some little nitpicks here and there and a couple really poor scenes. For the most part, I think the culmination of the prequel trilogy is good, but at the same time, if I'm being forced to watch just Star Wars, I think that the sequel trilogy has enough Star Wars that even though I am so frustrated by the end of it, and I am just so over it when I get to The Rise of Skywalker, I love enough of The Last Jedi. I think The Force Awakens is watchable enough, and I can shut my brain off for The Rise of Skywalker. I simply cannot ignore The Attack of the Clones. But that being said, I want to point out the overall point that I want to make in this video is that it is a hard choice, because at the end of the day, what it takes to make a really good trilogy is not just technical filmmaking, and it's not just visual effects. It is also a story. But you need both together, along with obviously good performances as well, to make a trilogy work. And that's really why the original trilogy stands above them all. What do you guys think of this video? What do you guys think? Would you rather watch the prequel or the sequel trilogy? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for supporting the Axis Blockbusters channel. So make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and I will see you guys in the next one.